Hi, everyone. Okay, there it's better. Well, that was a really short intro. But anyway, thank you for joining us today. Uh, I have a very special guest and friend with me today, Martina. And I had the pleasure to be with her, with a group that she has with amazing beings, amazing women were present that day, and we talk about several topics like what I do and like ancient artifacts and so forth. So now she is here. We are here together. We will be talking, as you know, about the moon and the heart and some encoded correlations that are behind these two fundamental aspects in our reality. And so, welcome, Martina, and welcome, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Issa. It's a pleasure being here in this expanded space. And do you know, before I came on, actually, I was thinking how much I enjoy cooking without a recipe.
Yeah.
And having had a couple of personal discussions with you and also the EN, obviously, you always have a capacity of bringing up new ingredients. And it's like, okay, let's throw that in the pot and let's throw this in. And then, I throw this in. And then in the end, we come up with this soup or stew. And then we just have to taste it and see, okay, well, what does that taste like? Oh, it needs a little bit more galactification. It needs a little bit more groundiness. And that's really exciting for me. So let's get cooking, right?
Yeah, let's start cooking. And I agree. I am also someone who enjoys more that factor of just flowing and allowing the melody and the symphony of the universe just flow through you, and actually even brings many surprises, which actually keep always nourishing our reality and not falling into the routine. Not that the routine has something good or bad. It's just like you and I are artists, everybody has a little bit of art inside themselves. However, when you flow more through that artistic aspect, you know how important it is to stay fresh, in all the components that you're using to create this masterpiece that we call life, right? So,
Absolutely. Well, stay fresh. And also, I mean, I call that out creation. I love out creating. But I think it's also a matter of staying out of judgment, staying out of the bias. What is this going to be now? What do we want it to be? Because as soon as I think we start doing that, we are actually, there comes this bottleneck, and then the information gets throttled, you know? So we just got to keep it open. We've got the moon, we've got the heart, we've got enough to work with that, right?
pretty much.
I mean, having done this intro now, but from your side, what that makes me think about is actually the gravitational force, right? Because the gravitational force is a flow of information in space-time. And since we're talking
Yes.
about the moon and the heart, we could maybe start with talking about the gravitational force of the moon and how it impacts
Yeah,
us
sure.
and the earth, of course.
Yes, sure. Like for instance, we know how I experience it, we always bring the gravitational field into our state of awareness because we want to access to that free energy and then start using cars, Jetsons, like go beyond that fuel and actually, you know, move on into the next stage of human evolution. And that is at the very technological level. However, when we are moving deeper into our the way that we are experiencing our reality, then what would the gravitational field be for us? And the gravitational field is the magnetic density field. Magnetic density field. So we're magnetizing dense energy. And actually, dense energy is that which allows us, it's like the pulp that we can use to manifest, to create. So, for instance, in this case, something that could be related to it, if we're talking about, like that dense energy, it could also be applied, for instance, to some emotions. We're magnetizing the emotions, we are attracting them to us because they're just information, they're energy in motion that result from information that is suspended in the field and that we get to relate to it in a very specific form. So then we magnetize it depending on the level of attachment that we have to that thought, to that egregor, and to a specific form of perception. So now, when we were talking before going live, I was thinking, like, let's say that our heart is the Earth's core, that it's magnetizing the moon. And as the moon is for the Earth, the emotions are for our heart. And what other way that we have to translate the emotions in our field? And it's the water. And then we have a bridge that is heart, emotions, or water, and the moon. So that foreplay in which the molecular structure in our body is responding to the frequency of the moon. And mostly, I will just touch this topic because then we can move deeper later. Yet, for instance, when we're talking about emotions, like what is a catalyzer for these emotions, or how can they be so anchored? And then we can say, okay, neurochemicals such as adrenaline, such as oxytocin, such as endorphins, such as all these neurochemicals that are actually created in the brain, and that they start to flow through our blood. And our blood has water at a plasma state. However, it's 55% of pure plasma, because actually it's more plasma. When we talk about taking into consideration the plasma at different scales. But when we are talking about pure plasma, to say it somehow, that is also it's water, onto some extent, a different scale, so therefore, through our blood is being transmitted all those neurochemicals that are amplified by the frequency of the moon. Yet, who magnetizes that? It's us. So the heart has the capability to actually whether expand it and create a field of coherence, or actually magnetize it as the very same pump, the spin, as the vortex. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I love it. And we might as well just, as you went straight into that, we might as well just look at the entirety of the heart. Because when we talk about the heart, we're not just talking about the heart, our physical heart that actually anchors us into the earth here, because we also have a sliver of the heart in our gut, right?
Yes.
That connects us to the black hole of the earth. And then of course we also have, if I remember that correctly, we have a bit of a heart in our pineal gland, right?
Yeah, we have actually in our heart a pineal gland, which is
the other way around. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So that, and I think, what we can do is we can really junk it up big time to give an overview and then slightly take it back down again. So, and I think it's something that the majority of people who have done the work of self-mastery and sovereignty are really familiar with the mind, heart, gut coherence.
Yes, yes,
This
yes.
is really what is required for us to look like, because if we then want to connect with the moon, because the way I associate, I also thought about this, and I looked back into, so what have I learned about the moon throughout my galactic studies with Andrew Barthes, for instance. And what he said, the moon is actually a cosmic gateway, where we as multidimensional beings, once we've done the self-mastery, once we've done the sovereignty work, we go to the moon to get our immigration papers from there. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing, I took that as face value. That's, yeah, okay, it is what it is. And, I can't really, how do I validate that? And then the interesting thing was, as soon as I started talking to you about the heart plasma activation, you showed me these 3 pictures, right? You're connecting the galactic heart to the mind. You're connecting the heart, obviously the heart, and then the gut to the earth. And then what you said, and this really triggered something, then you said you connected that galactic heart, let's call it the galactic, the multidimensional, you connected that to the 3 stars in Orion's belt.
Exactly.
And that for me was like, okay, there's the connection. Because Orion's belt is the next level of, once we are fully connected within our heart, we can then leave our bodies safely, not necessarily dying, but safely leave the body, get our immigration papers in the moon, go through that, and then through Orion's belt and leave the body. What do you say to that? Big picture.
Yes, yes, I agree. Like, as we know, Orion is the gateway to Earth. Like, how I have always remembered it and experienced it is, if we want to go to the outer space through a rocket, it will lead us to a space within the dome. And what's the dome? It's a perception. It's the perception, like the very same eye in our eye that it has like a dome. It's the same. However, if we want to connect beyond the dome, we shall access through the Earth's black hole. That's why a lot of spaceships are coming from the volcanoes, are coming from under the water, because through those 12 wormholes that are main wormholes that are in underground, connecting to the Earth's black hole, is that actually we travel there and then access to Orion. And this is always something that had been encoded and encrypted, sometimes in a very evident way. And however, it is like this analogy, like always trying to reach the top, actually ascension by going to the top. No, ascension is something that comes within, as we have also um, shared at some point. If you want to go to ascend, you have to go deep within. It's not outside, it's deep within. And the same thing, what you were now you were saying about this correlation of Orion and even the pyramids that I also mentioned to you. Like, I put the pyramids of Egypt in Giza. However, many pyramids, most of them, are connected to Orion's belt. So then if we take that to another level, we will see that even in our brain, we have pyramidal neurons that create patterns as the very same pyramidal grid, across the earth. And also even our cells, when they create all this, let's say, entanglements, they create also pyramids. So what is this saying to us? That what we see outside is what is within. So that's the correlation, like for our heart, what would the moon represent? And it's the tidal flow, of the emotions, which is the space that is around us, continuously surrounding us, like in this rotative form, and then we can say, okay, so the moon is constantly, like it's rotating around the earth. And we just get to see one side of it. So what's the other side that we don't see? And it's the same when we take that analogy to us, like that hidden aspect from us. And now if we go deeper, what is that which is hidden on the other side of the moon? Then, as far as I remember, there are labs there are ports, there are like very specific technology, as you said, like that they keep records of everything that happens in the earth. But yet it was not always like that. The moon, some people say that it was implanted, and you were saying in the very beginning, here there are not no absolute truths. Anyone can remember what it suits them the best. What I do remember and how I experience it is that even the correlation of the very same feminine, like the sun is the masculine, the moon is the feminine. So, and the feminine, it is said to be an artificial satellite. And then you see a humanity that keeps on perpetuating an artificial aspect on the feminine side, like all these forms, not only aesthetically speaking. I'm also talking about an inner layer, like how artificial is the feminine. The other day I was watching a documentary, and they would ask many women, what is it to be a woman? Or no, what is a woman? And they would be like, nobody answered. Nobody. And then if you link it to that artificial part, then you say, of course, because everything that has been shared about the feminine, what the feminine is supposed to be, is false. And it's not sustainable, not even for the inner wisdom to be capable to reproduce it in words. So I do feel that with this that we will be sharing right now, is will create or will open a pathway for a breakthrough within the connection to the primordial energy of the moon, which is Theia, that former planet. Because even I talked to you about this, like there are ancient texts, mostly about the Hopis, where they say and they recorded a life without a moon, and how the tides of the water would be so high and so unpredictable that, how I recall, the civilizations at that moment from the galactic community would create also the grid of the obelisks and the monoliths and other type of artifacts and structures to stabilize the tides of the water, so.
So you're talking about there's two things that come to mind. So the stabilization of the water, yeah. If we take this as a metaphorical representation, it's obviously not. But if we take that on the inner, it's the mood swings, the emotional. waves in our molecular structure, which is obviously part of the the dome and part of the conditioning and the upbringing and all the lifetimes and the timeline paradoxes and all of that. So that's the one thing. Yeah. And you're mentioning that artificial, there's two, again, I've got a slightly different background on the moon, which I can share later, but let's talk a little bit more on the artificial side of the moon, that you seemingly relate to the feminine. And I quite like that, because and this is another reason why we're having this conversation, I would say, because the feminine energy, and that's not gender related now, the feminine within all of us is starting to, I don't want to call it rise, but being healed. But even so, that, talking about opposites early on, what's the opposite of that? Well, the masculine is stepping forward big time too, because the masculine was just as bastardized as the feminine. And as we're bringing, those tidal waves together into a balance through that mind, heart, gut coherence, we're starting to be able to connect to the moon plasma. As we are activating our plasma here, the heart plasma, we connect to the moon plasma. But both the heart and the moon require healing from that. There has to be a restoration of both plasma vehicles of us, let's call it the heart, the galactic heart, and the moon itself, because as you say, stuff happened to the moon just as much as it happened to us. And this is now the time to really look from a bigger picture and then take it down and see how can we achieve that coherence and start attracting, not from that wavy, tidal, moody, hugely cyclical perspective, but more from a how can we actually within ourselves it become more balanced. And then how would that impact on the moon? Let's not take ourselves, we have an impact on the moon just as much as the moon has an impact on us.
For sure. And for instance, it is said that if the moon has not crashed into the earth, it's due to the rotation and that the earth has, and also the moon, so that's creating a very specific interaction in between the field of both that helps not for the moon to impact into the earth. However, and I think it's also, like a good moment to bring this up, that according to also, like ancient records, and even not that, well, they are based on the ancient ones, but the earth before it did not have an axis tilt. And I remember there is this wall in the temple, in Osiris temple in Abydos in Egypt, and it has the depiction of Isis trying to push to align back again Osiris column, which is the Diet. Mm-hmm. And the level of inclination that it has is actually the 23.5 degrees that the axis tilt of the Earth is, So now, how does this axis tilt fit in right now? Well, first, what caused the Earth's axis tilt? And it is said that it was precisely an impact generated by the moon at some point. That the moon was a former planet, Theia, and that it hit the Earth, create an impact, it broke in half. Well, not in half, but because it has been reconstructed to some extent, well, how I perceive it. But but it was cracked into different parts, created the Earth's axis tilt. And some of those parts came so strong and so rapidly that then they hit underground in South Africa. And those plates in South Africa are actually creating an alter effect, a parallel effect on South America, which is a big anomaly, besides the one that is already creating in South Africa. That it's a huge anomaly that won't even allow satellites to transit in those parts of South America, which are Uruguay, Paraguay, and Brazil. Well, a part of it, of course, not all the area of those countries. But anyway, so that's the first thing, the moon creating that axis tilt in the Earth. And I also have mentioned this. There is this mythos in the Aztec cosmology that they talk about this Aztec goddess Coyoshauqui, which is the moon goddess. She was so mean to her mother, which is the Earth, Gaia, Terra, Pistis Sophia, and then his brother came to do something about that behavior she had with her mother, and then split her into 5 parts. And when I read this, I said, wow, it is talking about precisely that impact that the moon had with the Earth, wounding it, creating an axis tilt, which is a lack of, it's a decentralization, and then that would lead for the moon after that crash to come into 5 pieces, to say it somehow, because the 5, it's also a code. So, and yeah, we could go even more, because that is extremely encoded, because even each part of that goddess has knots in each one of her members, knots, which is how the energy is bent in order, due to the gamma energy, because bending energy can only be applied through gamma waves. So what does this mean? A super exaltation of the waves. So this is, in other words, super fast. So that's what actually split it. And now it will lead us to the other topic that we had been talking, that we were covering the other day, which is realigning, restoring the heart to its true north.
Yssa, let me just ask you a question before we go.
Sure. No, go ahead.
So I want to go back to the tides of the tidal force, because the tidal forces of the moon, the way I understand it, and I haven't really looked into the tilt. I have, no particular thing on the tilt here, but the way I understand it is tidal forces, they create the seasons, right? And they create the climate. So, and that 23.5% tilt, and also with the gravitational force now starting to weaken, the distance between the Earth and the Moon is changing. And I personally would say, the little scientific background I have, but I would say that is what's impacting on our climate now, since the Earth is moving into the deeper into the photon belt, right? Now, when we talk about a different tilt, and you mentioned the 90%, the primordial tilt, 90 degrees, not percent, what would that look like in terms of, we wouldn't have any seasons, would we? What would the climate be like?
Well, as you said, the tilt is what is said that causes actually the equinoxes and the solstices,
Yes.
you know? So, for instance, when we go like innerly, aligning ourselves to the true north, what we are doing is generating that alignment to the unified consciousness, is that 0 point energy. Because as you know, the 0 point energy has no, it is everything and it is nothing at once, so that's why, for instance, when we're talking about this, it's not like going truly in alignment also about on the earth, but it's us with our alignment to that true north actually enable that breach, so that through our level of coherence that we will be accessing to that 0 point energy, bring that sustainability to the reality that we are shaping together, and then bring more bring not only that coherence into us, also into our reality and even through time, because imagine that right now, how the reality has been created for humanity with all the time systems like the calendars and so forth. If we really want to move forward and align to the cosmic rhythm, to the universal time, we really need to run. It's like in a very literal way, like we really need to catch up. So, of course, that is, as I was saying, not in a literal way, because what we have been told is run like a hamster. Run like a hamster, and then you will catch something. What, we don't know, but you will get there at some point, and you never get anywhere because you're just circling in the same loop. And that leads us to even more complex forms of configuring the artificial matrix through rings of time. But anyway, when it comes to what could we do, what could we possibly do in order to catch up to that frequency, and it's actually generating that alignment to the true north, to start creating from the 0 point energy, and then an alignment will be done, even though the earth will keep its axis, her axis, and we will be aligned energetically to the true north. For at a scale, like speaking in scales, the amount of energy that we need to produce to be even with the consciousness of the earth at this moment needs to be at 0 point energy, and then we will be aligning, because now energetically we are like really, due to, not because we are lacking consciousness, yet because how reality was warped, it leads to be like in disadvantage, without even being aware of that.
Okay. So the tilt of the Earth, of the axis, is actually not that relevant as such. Then, as long as we are, getting into our balance and harmony and aligning to our true north. Oh, yeah.
Actually, it will change at some point if we are talking about, but this is what I'm saying for now. Because let's say that we're moving forward to a seventh dimensional form of perception where the earth becomes a mothership. And then we start traveling, through different star systems and solar systems, like we have done already. Because at some point, the sun will die, you know so then we need to move forward. And I'm not, well, die, it's like a really uh, not really the accurate word. It will be evolving into what's next, so then we need to move forward, and for that we shall reach a seventh
Yeah.
dimensional form of perception. And for that, the axis tilt needs to also, move, be transcended. Otherwise, we won't be able to generate that as a collective in Earth. that 0 point energy that will actually move the gravitational, the magnetic density field of the Earth in order to move forward into other star systems. And
Right. Okay. So thanks for that. So I would also, the way I perceive many of us, of those ascending masters, having done the work and having, reached a certain level of awareness, we will have an opportunity to get off this planet ship, off Earth's planet ship, to travel whilst we're still in body, which some of us are already doing. And then, of course, at some stage, if we don't have to choose to come back onto this planet, but we can actually either work, become a planet if we reach a certain level of density, and start a whole new process as well. So I think, it, and this is what brings us back to the mastery work, isn't it? And that true north alignment, that, because we can't just sit back and say, okay, well, the earth is tilted now and we have to wait until the earth goes back into 90 degrees. No, it doesn't work that way, but it's a good thing to know, right? And how we are sort of influence, because we also, I think, as far as I'm concerned, I'm coming from an empowerment perspective, and lots of the people, we're getting to a stage where we said, okay, well, how much more work needs to be done when it comes to, how did the parents mess us up, and what lifetimes, and this and that. We have to, and this is what Nassim would say, we live in a participatory universe, right? So we're not just dependent on our neighbors, our parents, but also what's happening on the earth, what's happening on the moon, what is the connection between the earth and the moon, what's happening on the other planets, and frankly, what happens in the galaxies, because there's not just Milky Way galaxy, right? And
yes.
I just want to throw something in here from what I've been hearing at the time, was that the moon was already in this solar system, and then the earth and the other planets, the galactic minded planets, they came in and created that galaxy, that Milky Way galaxy. And part of the moon's job has always been to, through the gravitational force, to make sure that none of those planets would bump into each other. So this is a slightly different perspective, which I just want to throw in. And then,
Yes.
this is a soup, right? So let's throw it all in,
Sure.
to really make sure that those three galaxies in particular, the Milky Way, the Sirius galaxy, and the Andromeda galaxy, that, that nobody, collides. So that
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the moon, there are, as you said, like there are so um, many forms of perception with which we can approach to it, and all of them are based for me on one aspect, which is the importance that the moon has on the earth, and that it's not about rejecting it, it's about embracing it and mastering it. As unfortunately, there are few, let's say, trends or like forms of perception, beliefs that point out to the moon as something evil. And it's very, very interesting because when in some of the schemes that are used to place the planets, like this famous seven, which are not planets, but like the way that the ancient ones would take into consideration the seven celestial bodies, which include the moon and the sun, not taking into consideration either Uranus or Neptune, and of course, not even Pluto, So it is more about, or any other exoplanet. So it is more about these seven celestial bodies that around the earth being the one, at the center. For instance, you have you have the moon, and it is in like then it is just facing Saturn, and it's within the construction of the Metatron's cube, and which is the hexagon, and which is the very same hexagon that is present in Saturn. So, for instance, also there is also a lot of distortion, as how I perceive it, that has been implanted on all those celestial bodies, because they just are. The frequency that they will catch is what we are emitting and what is implanted on them. So for me, one of our biggest tasks is to restore the pristine consciousness that they have, because actually they can help us big time for in our evolution. Like, for instance, if you master the moon frequency, you don't what do you have to care about? It's not about outside, it's about within. How impeccable we are with ourselves, and how entitled we are to navigate and surf our own waters. How much we allow ourselves. What are we magnetizing? And in this also correlation of the movement, the elliptics being the ones that prevent both bodies to crash into one another, according to one of the theories. It also represents the importance of movement,
Mm.
moving ourselves, and perhaps not in a literal way, just in this refreshing ourselves, going beyond the routine. Because again, we can adopt very specific routines. However, if we are very aware that what we do as a routine is what is being implanted in our neuronal pathways and creating our memories, that then will be used to create new memories or to use new timelines, we will be perpetuating the same cycle over and over and over and over again, until we refresh something, about that routine. So then we're accessing to new timelines, to to dormant genes, and so forth. So yeah. And
Absolutely. I mean, that's the old story of above so below, within so without, that kind of thing. And that's why I said early on, I think, by us aligning to our true north, we become the contributors, to everything else changing on the outside of ourselves. And that is, as you say, those habitual patterns, those old conditionings, all of that requires movement. And I think that's, even the energies, we always say energies are, emotions are energies in motion, so I'm with all this self-mastery business, we're coming away from being dependent on emotions, expressing ourselves through emotions, because we are starting to really tap into our sensorial perception. And that sensorial perception is a completely different way of perceiving energies. First of all, we're no longer making them personal. We're not going into judgment of the self and others, but we are actually starting to perceive energy rather than words, concepts, perceptions of the old. So it's almost like starting to live from a place of energy, looking at everything as an energy. Don't know why I said this now, but I think it sort of fit what you said early on. True north alignment, and again, we're here, like, now this maybe leads us back to the heart plasma activation, and that the heart, head heart, gut coherence. That's where it all starts.
yes, and yeah, thank you for bringing this up again. You touch a very important point, because We know that memory, how we register memory, is based on emotions. And for instance, yesterday, even as I was exercising, I was thinking, well, when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally speaking, you use that fuel to exercise, to paint, to cook, to do whatever in order to bring that sublimation, that energy, transforming it into something that can actually be of benefit, you know? And then I was, okay, so then what happens when we reach a point, like when we move forward from that and we're not attached to those emotional aspects? And that's when we can actually create, when we can focus ourselves on creating a new model, because then you're not just focusing in subliming in the sublimation of those emotions. You're focusing on what you choose to become, or what we are choosing your reality to become. And that's actually what even a lot of scientists also always postulate. It's like, when you want to transform something, you don't focus in collapsing a model. You focus on creating a new model, and then that will make eventually the other one collapse. So, and now, when we are already embodying a part that you could say, okay, so then if memory is based on emotions, it's anchored, because how it functions is that for every event that you're experiencing, you're producing neurochemicals. These neurochemicals emit a frequency, and this frequency emit patterns that create patterns in our brains, in our neurons. The ones that are the strongest are the ones that will prevail to be encoded as a vivid memory. The other ones will fade away. So normally what anchors more are fear, or like really exalted, forms of arousal, of being really exalted, all those kind of emotions. Like, what things you remember the most in life? Like the best things that happened to you, and the worst things. And even to an extent, a lot of people remember more the worst ones. Why? Because they are anchored through the neurochemicals that are creating a bigger frequency in the neurons. Therefore, they create these huge neuronal pathways that it's easier to access to them. And then patterns are repeated and so forth. So, anyway, when we want to move forward, when we have chosen to move forward, then it's about cycles. How long are we staying in an emotion? Bam, you're feeling anger, you're feeling excitement, you're feeling okay, you integrated. Now you just use it as energy, which is what you were saying. And that energy, that movement, you can actually program your brain through that plasma that you're emitting to anchor that memory instead of unconsciously doing it.
I hear what you're saying. It's like, and I can speak from experience, the most difficult thing that I've ever been experiencing, and it was like a wavelength, a longer wavelength of coming out of duality thinking. As soon as you leave behind the good and the bad, you get into that sacred neutral perspective, and then all of a sudden it's like, oops, nothing happens there. There's no triggers. I'm just like floating. What the hell? And then you start realizing that you've actually never really used the free will, because we didn't even know what choice was, because the
Yes.
body, the parasympathetic, sympathetic just throw us into reaction mode, right? And now, creating from that place of non-bias and of sacred neutrality is, like you say, it's an energy. You got to become the perceiver and receiver of the energies that are out there. And this is also, from my own perspective, I have to say, is where that inner journey almost sort of says time out, because movement, action is required. You've got to start participating again in the world, with the world, in the environment, without fear that you are reacting, without, oh, I don't like this, this is boring, this is that. And you've heard me say that, because it becomes that, because we have to completely change our perception, and our sensory perception is, we have to start listening. We have to start become present, completely present with what is. This is where synchronicities come in. This is where, and everything then becomes slightly magical and mystical. But in reality, it's the only thing that we've changed is we've taken away all the crap that's bogged us down, and now finally start to really perceive what's happening around us and how is that impacting within us, and the other way around. And this then and this is why we're having this sort of galactic expanded perception, is because then all of a sudden we start hearing the sound frequency from the moon, right? And apparently what I've been hearing, there's something called the quad wobble there, which is four frequencies that turn into 8 spheres of communication, particularly through the equinox and all that. Now, what did you and I discuss the other day when we talked about the heart? You were telling me about the 4 chambers. So tell us about, that's another connection. And
Yes.
Go.
No,
Tell us.
I'm sorry. And, like, even they have witnessed in Jupiter an octagonal cyclic vortexes, so that 8, and we're in an 8 in a year number 8. I know that we're in a 9, but anyway. So, but anyway, time is related to the 8 and to the infinite and rings of time. So, in relation to the heart and to the moon, the heart has 4 chambers, and it has 4 main vessels that are bringing the blood and taking out, well, not taking out, but circulating the blood through it. So it has 4 and 4, which are 8 fundamental pillars in it. And actually, when you get to master the geometry of those vortexes that your heart is generating, along with the 4 vessels that are continuously moving that current, that blood current, what you create is a beautiful, beautiful disc, which is the heart disc that we have been talking about. It's a beautiful disc that is a stargate that actually, if you zoom it to the brain, because the brain functions similarly, as you have mentioned, not only for the neurons, that are, it is the same kind of network, and of course it's connected. However, what I'm referring to at this moment is when you have the disc, the heart disc would be in a let's say coronal cot, whereas the brain disc will be in a transversal cot. So what this means is when both come together, you actually, it's like bring in all the force coming from the thymus gland, which is the high heart, which is the gateway to outside of this reality within the body, energetically speaking. And then they compress, they merge, they create this huge vortex, not only of 8 and 8, now of 16, and then which is a 7, which is the 7 directions of the cube that unfolds, and then you leave the body.
Amazing. And this is why heart activation is important. Galactic heart, and understanding that galactic is maybe not the right word, the multidimensional combination of the, I think, mind, heart, gut coherence is a very cool expression to understand it from that perspective. Because the one thing, if you really want to leave your body consciously and safely, then you have to be aligned with your heart along those lines. And
For sure.
there's something like I read this morning. It's like, first step, do what's necessary, like educate yourself, and educate yourself outside of the box. It's like we were talking about memory. Memory can be an inspiration, but be aware that the memory that we have created and that we have put into books and everything has already been out created a million times. So once you use it as inspiration, what is it that you can move beyond? How can you move beyond that? And how can you actually add your intuitive knowingness? And it's tough because, like we're talking out of our, like we always have to say, I remember, or I have to make connections, because I'm not the one who remembers. I just make a few pattern recognitions. I let YssaH remember, and I say, oh, hey, before, let's put this together somehow, right? And
Yes.
okay too. So we all have our own gifts, because I then use that information and I love to ground it in. What are we going to do with that? And again, I lost the thread now why I started in the first place talking about this. But yeah, heart activation.
Yes. Yes. Like, um, it all comes to the heart. It is the return to the origin, because that's the first organ that is created in our body as a fetus, you know, and the one that stop beating or bumping, like spinning, and in order for us to transcend the physical body. Yet, when I say, I also want to make it this very clear. When I say leave the body, I not forcefully talking about you transcending the body and not coming back again.
Absolutely.
It is that power of actually, like, teleporting yourself, even, like, whether transferring your consciousness at such a huge scale that your body becomes like dormant state, like just there, or even capabilities of teleportation, because you're moving such a big field. Of course, to reach that, you require a humongous level of coherence. And perhaps for some people would mean like, teleportation, okay, that's too sci-fi. Well, science, quantum physics will soon prove that teleportation, well, they're already using it, so however, different scales of teleportation. And if we are seeing, if we become aware that what we see in science is a manifestation of the tech that is inside, yeah, perhaps it's not that simple yet, but it is feasible, and depending on the level of consciousness that we are actually embodying. So the heart tech, it's very interesting because, like, ever since I remember, the heart has been always related in a very romantic way to, like, to like, as being foolish, like, yeah, you use the heart and you're not that smart, like, I'm in the smart gang, and you're in the lovers gang or whatever, like this constant um reflection of the hemispheres trying to come together, the brain hemispheres, the earth hemispheres, and so forth, and which is actually the main purpose of the of the of the magnetic pulse reversal. If we reach the singularity within, things will shift also without. So the magnetic pulse reversal is just showing to us going from one pole to another. Okay, now I don't like, now I like I like black. But not being aware that we are all, it's not about the choice anymore. It's about the limited choice of just choosing one side, whereas we are both sides, you know. So the heart coherence and the heart tech is showing to us, for instance, if we're talking about that alignment to the true north, to the north of origin, that will also have an impact in our brain hemispheres. Because if you say, okay, our heart is a little bit inclined on to the left, and okay, which is the feminine aspect? Oh, right, the left. No wonder why the feminine aspect feels more. No wonder why the masculine aspect, the energy feels less. Yeah, because it was also configured, because when we understand how this reality, this holographic reality is created, is generated, and was created, we will understand why there are no coincidences, because everything was exposed from one blueprint and then expanded symmetrically and then merged with with entropy, and that's where the oceans of chaos, or the perfect order in chaos happens. But everything starts from a blueprint. So moon and heart, inclination, axis tilt, coincidence? No. In this artificial matrix, this is the way it was created, to align our heart by piecing with that force that at some point wounded us, which is actually what is now ruling our waters, our emotions, or deeply influencing, until we become aware that that information is within us, that plasma that you were talking about. But wait, does the moon has such a strong magnetic field in order to create plasma? Well, as I mentioned to you the other day, I saw images of aurora borealis being witnessed in the moon. So, but I can tell you something, perhaps that plasma seen, and what we can call the plasma coming from the moon, is the very same plasma that coming from the sun, that reflects on the moon and then comes to us, creating that trinity.
Yeah, I was just about to say, we talk a lot about the sun flares and the sun plasma and all of that, but we don't talk about the moon plasma. But and if it's a reflection or if it's a different kind of plasma, at the end of the day, it's all one, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but the invitation here is really, as you said earlier on, the invitation is to look at harmony, to understand balance, to understand that we need to incorporate the yin yang, the left and the right hemisphere, the moon and the earth, and bring it all on into balance. And balance does not, and this is also what I misinterpreted for a long time, because sacred neutrality, balance, doesn't mean that there is no wave anymore. There are waves, right? There are always
Yes.
waves, but you're no longer going into the right or the wrongs of either side you're on. And I need to ask you now a question, because you talk a lot about the longitudinal waves, right? That is a different kind of wave. Is that more a sacred neutral wave already, where we have like the wave and the particle going into the same direction? Or do you wanna give us something on that?
Sure. The longitudinal waves are equidistant in the length from one hemisphere to the other, like even projected into four directions. They are projected into four directions, and they are like symmetrically flowing and compressed. That's how quantum tunneling functions.
Mm-hmm.
How linear funneling goes through the what we know as transversal waves, which are synodal.
Mm-hmm.
That is the linear perception of wave motion, which exists because we can perceive that way. However, when we're talking about a quantum level, how energy travels is through longitudinal waves. So this reality is packed up with surface waves, which is the communion of the longitudinal waves and the transversal waves. So when you put those together, you get the surface waves. Yet the longitudinal waves are, like, um, they unify and harmonize as they spin.
Fantastic. So that's really important to know. That okay, that leads me back to what I started when I said what is necessary to learn new things all the
Yes.
time. And maybe tend away from what our textbooks say. Listen to shows like that, and be the magpie that I am. Just pick whatever you like and go and do your own exploration after that, so you can start creating outside the box. Because after the necessary, that's the basis. It's almost like the safety that we need to give to our bodies. Before we start dreaming, we have to make sure that we've got food in the house or a place where it's warm. Yeah, this is just the responsibility of a human being. There's no point to have all these high convoluted dreams if you're not able to really get some food onto your table. So that's the necessary part. Then the next part, you can talk about possibilities. This is one of my favorite words. What are the possibilities, the infinite possibilities? And you start playing, and then you start making soups like us. You just throw in a lot of stuff and then taste it, what it's like. What else can we add? Who else can we add to our lives that has some other ingredients that we haven't considered yet? And then from there, and that is a play, it's a joy, it's a blissful.
Mhm.
It's like, this is fun for us to do that, right? And
Definitely.
with others is beautiful too. Um, then after that comes the impossible. We don't have to create the impossible anymore, because necessity and possibility automatically creates impossibility. And that
Yes.
was, whoa, surprise. What just happened?
I agree, and you know why? This is why when I say, for instance, they connect with the vacuum force. It's not about, for instance, if you're feeling sorrow. Normally, what you were taught to do is like reject the sorrow, put it away, and then bring joy and stay in joy and just joy and bam. But however, how you alchemize, truly alchemize, is bring that sorrow that you're feeling, bring the joy that you could be feeling, neutralize them both, bring them to 0 point energy, and then manifest. Because then you're going beyond that polarization. Because if you are, um, for instance, aiming for something over and over and over and over and over again, perhaps you will achieve it in this lifetime and even make it sustainable. However, in another lifetime, you could face, the counterpart of everything that you were doing, because universe looks for harmony and for
Exactly.
wholeness. So we have reached that point where, as you were saying, it's about energy and about the amount of energy that we need in order to create. And like, where we of course go through that path of identification with very specific memories, facing emotions, then transcending them, and so forth, in cycles, to reach that point where all of that information created a very specific algorithm that you're embodying right now. Do you want to keep that algorithm, or can you improve it? If you can improve it, then that's another story. But it's about that. And then the universe starts to relate to you at the very same level of language that you are using to communicate with it.
Absolutely. And this algorithm is all about focus then. When it comes to, when we get to that level of, we've done a certain level of work, it comes back to choice and focus. What am I choosing? What can I be and do today in order to choose me, for me, as me? And that's not egotistical or anything like that. That's actually really acknowledging yourself as a co-creator in this universe. And when we also say, like what you just said, the universe is starting to communicate with you, it's like you are beginning to get back into your source connection. And also, who is communicating with you? Well, all the soul shards, the selves, the fractals, the fragments that are on different timelines, dimensions, galaxies, universes, even solar systems. And the plan, because remember, and this is where sometimes lots of people, after they've done the spiritual work, awakening, blah, blah, all that, what they do is they go back to religion. Because all of a sudden say, okay, well, there is something there, and there is, but it doesn't have to be a church. It doesn't have to be that. It is source that you are connected to, and it is you finding your way back to what you pre-planned before you came onto this planet through the birth channel. That's the destiny. If you want to call it destiny, I'm happy to call it destiny. But for me, it's like I have to remind myself, oh, this is what I planned. Oh, why the hell would I have planned this? This is so weird. But then when I just let go of the resistance and just look at them thinking, okay, that feels right, which we were saying the other day, feeling is not an emotion. Feeling is being in touch with your physical body, feeling the energy again. We're not defining it, but we can define, the only definition I would say is, where do you feel it? Feel it in your throat, feel it in your little finger, feel it in your toe, to really embody. And the other thing is, because I've always had this thing with grounding. I am the biggest grounder out there. Talking about opposites, right? You were saying, what's the opposite of the moon? Well, let's start with, everything is the opposite of what it appears to be. I never thought I was grounding. Actually look at the opposite of what that is. Well, in fact, that's what I do, So that looking at the opposite is so important, because only then we can bring the shadow and the light together, which is only defined by each other.
Yes, I agree. And you were saying, for instance, that, like, remember why, like why I chose all these events and these manners, these branches within the pathway. And for me, uh, yes, it is the why, and it's also the what for. Because the why nourishes your ego, it satisfies it, it makes it feel safe. And the what for is what is driven by the echo of the spirit. Like, remember, you're there. That's the what for. So that brings you into that axis, because being a creator, the creation, being capable to transfer our consciousness to everything and anything comes by embodying as an axis of our reality. And that is a huge responsibility, and also a lot of power, and also a huge bliss. So I do believe that it's a huge invitation for all humanity to, uh, and even all beings, because then we are mirroring into one another, of occupying our place and
And
our
it's
space.
a co-creation. It's a co-creation anyway. Don't think for 1 second you could do it by yourself on your own. No, it's a contribution to each other, and every single one of us is a piece. And some of us are not really defined as pieces, so they don't necessarily fit into the puzzle, into one particular puzzle, because they're shape shifting from one puzzle to the next. And that could be quite annoying for some. And it's most annoying for those that do it and don't even know that they're doing it, because that's what they've come here for. Some of us have come here to not be the puzzle piece to fit, because
Yes.
we're supposed to go and create new puzzles, right? And assemble others to come towards us. That's the celestial medium that lots of us have. What for are we here? It's not the why. I like that. Why is never a good question, because it's got that, oh, what's wrong with you? Why? What have I done wrong? Right? No, for what purpose?
Why?
For what purpose have we done this? Millions of times now, over and over and over. Look at the resilience of the human being. Because literally, the majority of people that are on this planet now, they are old souls, and lots of youngs too, because we need to learn to come out of the box. And this is the other thing, what for? Look at the youngsters that are coming onto this planet now. They come in with a different sort of attitude. They come in with different, look at all the autistic people, look at all of that. We need to be able to service them, to contribute to those people too. And we are seeders. Old souls on this planet are seeders. So what can we plant? What seeds can we plant in this tiny, tiny box? That's a lifetime from a soul's perspective. It's not even a snip of the finger, right? So let's not take ourselves too serious. Let's just have some fun with this, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the dynamism at what actually brings, for me, that key ingredient that allows us to create that 0 point energy, because we're not coming from any expectation. It's like, for instance, what's the purest state of a child? They don't have expectation. They're just receiving. They're receptors and emitters, of course, but they are just, being like blasted by everything that they are experiencing. They're nourishing themselves from that. And how rapidly they manifest,
Oh,
like
yeah.
immediately.
No
And
point of
that's
view.
the 0 point energy. So and also, one of the best ways to manifest is through laugh. Like if you're going through a period of laughter, like you can stop, think of whatever you want to manifest, and it's like it's a huge gateway to do that, to actually manifest that. So yeah.
Humor is one of those ingredients. Is whatever you're cooking without recipes, you always have to have a couple of pinches of there, right? So I've got a question for you now, because we're talking about 0 point energy being the energy of creation after we've moved out of duality, right? Or
Yeah.
not even after, once we're starting to appreciate that. So the three energies we're using: 0 point energy, the vacuum energy, and the black hole energy. Could you give us the difference between the three, if there is one?
Sure. For me, it is a path that one leads to another. For instance, when you extract 0 point energy through the vacuum with from the black hole through the vacuum, that is actually like the combo of those three aspects coming together. So saying it in another way, for instance, the vacuum is the motion, the let's say the mechanics that you use in order to extract 0 point energy from the space or from the black hole, and which part of the black hole could we precisely be extracting that 0 point energy? Well, from the singularity, because in the singularity is where that 0 point energy is created, that communion in between two poles. So the black hole is this womb that is not only an entrance, It also has an exit. There are quantum physicists like Penrose that relate to it as the white hole instead of black hole, like that
Yeah.
counterpart. However, let's say that, and it's obvious, like for something to go in, it needs to have somewhere to go out, even if it's the same place, which is not the best organically speaking. But anyway, so that black hole is one aspect where things enter, which is that magnetic aspect, not this violent magnetic force. No, it's sustainable. It's quite sustainable. And then when it's sucked or magnetized, better magnetized, that energy is magnetized by the black hole, then it will reach at some point the singularity. We live inside a black hole. Our galaxy is inside a black hole. What we get to see as the black hole in the center of this galaxy is actually the way how we got in, the way how our solar system got in this black hole, so we know that it's quite stable. So now, um, and this is where magic happens. This is where life is created inside the black hole, like in correlation or as a connotation, well, in an analogy with with the womb. Where does life begin? Like physically speaking, in the
Mm,
darkness, the
mm.
seeds inside the soil. So that black hole is the space where life begins. And the 0 point energy is the field that enables that creation. Why? Because it's not pulling or pushing. It's there creating that space, that sustainable space for life to be created. And the vacuum force is that double sided force that is as the yin and yang coming together. However, before coming together, it starts to create a field of decompression. We can call it void in between the centrifugal and the centripetal force, to say it somehow. They are enclosed at the center, at a counter, and then that creates that void. And in that void is the black hole, and is the 0 point energy. So that's
Fantastic.
why if you see the shape of a black hole from above or from below, you will see that around the black hole there are two forces surrounding, doing this dance, like the yin yang.
So you're also describing, as you do that, and thanks for that, you're also describing the toroidal field, right?
The toroidal field, yeah, for the singularity, and for the let's say that that's a very good question. Let's say that in terms of scale, every fundamental unit is a tiny torus. And every tiny torus has a black hole and a white hole and a singularity. So, yes, it's
Right.
just at different scales.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great stuff. There's something else, and I don't know where to put this, but I want to throw it in the soup too. I don't know if it fits with the restoration of plasma. It's like we're building our plasma bodies, and that's something that you do as well. I've done the source code activation with you, but you're also doing plasma body activations. And and again, this is not like for us to get out of this body, out of this earthly existence or anything like that. But I'm thinking with the plasma, what it used to be before. Before there was like Lemurian, let's take Lemurian times. We were much more etherical. So the solidity, there wasn't like earth, water, air defined as such. And maybe I'm going completely wrong with this, but maybe this is part of when you were talking about Theia crashing into the earth and splitting into five broken pieces. And you mentioned the pentagram, and you mentioned, and then we looked at the protein, and the five elements basically, right? So as we are restoring back to our plasma body, we're becoming more etheric again. So we're not dissolving, but we're already seeing that our nutritional sort of options are changing, and things like that. So we're eating differently, sleeping, and people like you were saying, I remember, you don't even need to sleep or eat or anything like that. So in the book, and I read this the other day, in the Tibetan Book of Death, because death is also hugely important to look at. In order to really live, we need to really start necessarily understanding what death is all about. And I'm wondering if that plasma activation has slightly something to do with the death process. And what they're saying in that book, and I read that as a synchronicity for some reason, that the five elements start to fade, and we start off with the earth goes into the water. As the earth goes into the water, the body starts getting heavy, and we're sort of losing our eyesight, that kind of thing. Then the water goes into the fire, and then lots of people, before they actually move on, they're very thirsty and they're asking for something, and then the hearing goes. Then from the fire goes into air. This is where people get very cold. And think about it, when you do, I've often seen this when I worked with people and they had huge changes in their sort of awareness. They started vortexing. I always said, oh, she's vortexing, so the work is done. We can't do any more than that. They get really, really cold. Even I got cold, So fire going into air, and then obviously air going into ether. And this is where then the breath eventually stops. This is not what I'm saying here is that what I'm perceiving in this lifetime, lots of us are practicing already during our life what we used to in other lifetimes only experienced in our life review and afterwards. So how, long story short here, how is that elementary and the plasma connected?
Well, the plasma is the ether.
Yeah.
It's the plasma at the Planck plasma, which is the fundamental unit of every particle. Let's say the smallest. That's why it's a fundamental. So if we state that the ether it's constructed by the other four elements, what we know as elements, the other four elements are plasma themselves at different scales. For instance, the fire, the water. I love when you can see through the reflection of the water, like the sun rays hitting into the water, how you see these quantum filaments, like a hologram. So it's telling us, it's fluid plasma, perhaps not as the mercury is, but it's a different composition and an entanglement in the molecular structure. So in comparison, for instance, what we know as a rainbow body, which is, you on purpose and deliberately by your choice, choose the day, the time that you will be leaving the body by by using your rainbow body and dissolving your big part of your body. That difference into the other one that you like just passing away, to say it somehow, is that it's the process of acceleration of the components, those four elements actually leaving the body at a very high scale, and even yes, the very or the biggest scale of plasma of ether, because then that what is happening is that it is it doesn't actually dissolves. What is actually it's reordering its molecular structure and returning into that space that we don't see. And the main core of the body, which is known as the spirit, goes into another dimension. But what we know as body, for instance, in the case of the rainbow body, that part which apparently dissolves, it is just and like compressing so much, it becomes so much entangled at some moment that then it releases. And in that releasing, what happens is that it reorders, reaggregates into another another field. It by resonance, it follows um, the very same space that is not seen, you know and in the case of an organic, let's say, both of them are organic, but like someone who would just pass away, is the time that it takes for those elements to reorder, reaggregate themselves into another construction of reality. It's like they shift their molecular structure. That's why, and their quantum tunneling becomes so coherent that the quantum tunneling is going back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, because it's the transformation, it's the metamorphosis of those elements. So it's going back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, so that you can actually you see through them. That's why you don't see them. That's why you see through them, due to the impact of that quantum tunneling being so accelerated, and then goes into that space, to become another part of another construction of reality. And now that you were saying this, so yes, I do see how even like it reminded me of the Isis knot. That is a symbol, a glyph, a hieroglyph that is used to show, and was used to show, how you need to bend the energy of your spirit, of that purest plasma ether that composes your multidimensional body, that is the core for your multidimensional body, how you need to bend it to anchor yourself into this reality. No.
Fantastic. This is why it's come in then. Thank you for that. This is why it's come in, because it helps us to manifest as well as de-manifest in a much more conscious way, which takes out the fear, because it's again an essential knowingness that we have those capacities. And what I'm finding, as soon as you have an awareness about something, everything changes already. Your entire perspective changes. There is no practice necessarily. Well, sometimes it is, but it goes faster and faster now. As you change your you get some more information in that fits perfectly in there. Even though when you start off, and this is what I thought, thinking when I read this, thinking, I don't know if I can use that, but that's interesting. It interests me. But now, having said it and you elaborated on it, makes perfect sense, because it's the purity of plasma that we're actually talking about.
Yes.
And how was that connected then to the moon again?
Yeah, that's what that's what was coming to my mind exactly. The purity of the moon plasma, because okay, whether if it is proved or not that the moon is experiencing its own aurora borealis, what we know that if like 99.99999% of the space is constructed, like it's made of plasma, and the rest is plasma at a like cooled plasma, then we can say that definitely there is plasma in the moon. So now, how is that plasma influencing the plasma in our blood? The plasma in which our neurochemicals are moving through our body, through our blood. And then we know that there are different levels of plasma. Some of those plasma, it's easier for us to connect with. Some of them it's more profitable for us to connect with, and some of them not. For instance, from the solar flares, if we actually access to that point in our solar plexus that is capable to filter that plasma and bring it and into its maximum state, then we are accessing to that, to, let's say, to more energy, to more and more, to more energy. Like, however, as many people don't know about this, then it's like just receiving the waves, the water, the waves of the ocean, and just bam, bam, bam. The wave is coming, but you're not looking and actually moving in a way that the wave won't hit you. So it's the same thing. That's the solar flares, because actually the solar flares are at some point crashing into the Earth's magnetosphere. So that is generating an impact in the
Exactly.
Earth. So it's not very nice for the Earth. However, you enjoy it.
It's
It's
not the moon that is the bad boy here. No. Crashing into us. But you see, you said that early on, actually, the moon is getting a bad rap, and just because of the tidal, forces and the connection with the emotions and all of that. But we mustn't forget that again, from my source, from earlier studies, the moon it's got huge technology, up to 9 dimensional beings living there. Ascended masters are living there in crystal cities. It's almost like a moon Akash, where we can go there. Dreamtime societies there now. Dreamtime can go there. So, and that's not, that's just the moon, because obviously, moon, Earth, but then all the other planets, it's another exploration for another day. You remember, and I just pretend I know what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Remember these things? I know we're just going to put it together, but you did one post which I liked about the Rainbow Bridge, and you just lined up those planets, and just, I looked at the Rainbow Bridge a lot from a soul perspective, and what the soul's journey. But then, it just made that line, made me just realize that, yeah, we got to use everything. And as we said early on, we're talking about we are in that dome. So we need to get out of this dome, beyond this dome,
Yeah.
And that not from a place of, somebody put us under a cheese thing, whatever that's called. No, it's like, we've all been included in all of that. We've done the bad, we've been the goodies and the baddies. And it's just fun. Let's contribute to each other. What do you know? What do I know? And this is why those shows. And I'm so super grateful that you brought me on, because I love that kind of conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And let's do this more often. Every time that we get to talk, I always get to think, why didn't we record this? And now we're doing it. So
Exactly.
Yes. So any last words that you would like to say?
I got another question.
Now okay, sure. Go ahead.
Sorry, just because I have written that down, and I thought I had to ask.
Yeah.
Sorry. There was a sweet spot of Versica harness. Do you know what that means? That thing that I sent you?
A sweet
Vesica Pisces, we know that.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
What's the sweet spot of a Vesica Pisces to harness that? Because that's what obviously what it means.
Well, the ways that I can approach to that is, for instance, if we go genetically speaking, we create vesica piscis not only in the moment that our cells are replicating, just by the moment that they are creating the mitosis, it creates a vesica piscis. Yet also, for instance, when we are talking about our mitochondrial DNA, they entangled when they are actually activating dormant genes. They what they do is that they generate closed loops, well, the closed curves, and those closed curves are entangled to one another, so they are creating the shape of a vesica piscis, and that happens when you are actually awakening something hugely important that was dormant and that now you're bringing into life. And that's another aspect. Another aspect is when we go into interdimensional travel, when and which links to the DNA. For instance, when you are configuring this the space-time fabric, and by configuring I mean weakening or strengthening very specific spatiotemporal constants, the way that you do it is by it you will see by weakening them some spatiotemporal constants which actually separate the thread, like they would collapse. And in that moment is the perfect moment to refraction it and put like the optimal information that you want on it. So this will create this timeline that collapsed will find like neurons, another timeline that is reaching into, and then create another, and at some point unify themselves. So it's beautiful, and then we'll create um, it creates an alter timeline, a variant, an upgrade of that space-time fabric within that space-time fabric. And another way that we can approach to that from an astrological perception is through Pisces. The moment that we overcome the separation and the two fishes meet each other through the Trinity, which is Cetus, then they meet, they face each other, and they create the Vesica Pisces. If you just remove from those two circles 3/4 from it, and then you just leave the central part, you will see that there are two fishes
Mm.
embedded in one another and sharing one eye. So that's another one.
So can we say that the sweet spot would be the shunya point, the axis?
Would be the G point.
The
I'm kidding.
no shunya. That the zero point again.
Yes, definitely.
Mm.
The eye. Definitely. The
Yeah.
eye. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Fantastic.
it is. Yes.
Good.
Yeah. So is there anything that you like, any words that you want to say to the audience about this, like just to summarize?
So any words to the audience? I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks, Issa. Thanks, Issa, for having me on. I really enjoyed that. And I always enjoy our private conversations as well. I can certainly recommend this chick to do some work with. She's very experiential. You get the necessary, you get the possibility, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the impossibility. So that's definitely something I can do. And then from my perspective, from my side, the best thing to do is I'm going to show you my book.
Yeah, I think you need to remove the background so
Oh no,
that people can see it.
that's too much work. A time traveler's journey from challenge to choice. And that's pretty much a very distilled summary of all the work that I've done, a bit of my journey, the people I've worked with, I'm grateful for, and a little bit of a like, where are we going into the future, which most of you already know. And if you get through this and you're still alive and awake, you can always get in touch with me. I'm all over the social media platform.
Yeah,
So,
where can people find you and where can people find your book?
oh, it's on Amazon. A Time Traveler's Journey from Challenge to Choice, my name. And then I've got martinagrubmueller.com. That's my new one. That's for my art at the moment. I'm an artist now, artist of life, and also I'm painting. Here we go.
Like, yes, show your art.
Yeah,
For a moment.
fantastic.
Beautiful. Yeah, you just had an exhibition, right? Actually,
Yes,
so
I did have my first exhibition in London, which is absolutely, great experience. And I've got a digital exhibition going in October this year. And I live in London, so when you go up, I don't know, whoever's been to London will know, when you go up the escalators in the tube stations, often you see artists and musical and all sorts of, and they're gonna have Grand Rising, one of my paintings, up when you go up the escalators in 3 different tube stations. So I'm super excited.
oh, congratulations!
And I'm gonna
That's awesome.
go into some art magazine as well. So it's all good stuff in October. Yeah.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Yay! Expansion, love it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, well, I also recommend Martina. She has amazing art, not only beautiful, like to experience through the eye, also with deep meaning. And yeah, you can dive into that universe and actually access to a couple of codes and messages for you to unveil, when you become that observer of her art. And it's actually because I do believe that art is very important to continuously be emitting, like a good frequency. There is art that actually brings another frequency, and you can tell by the way that it harmonizes or not the place. And your art, I find it, like very harmonizing. So,
Well,
and
thank
at many levels,
Thank you.
yes.
I've done so much healing and empowerment work and facilitation, and I'm still available for those too. But you get to a stage at some stage, you're just gonna emanate the energy, and for me, it's been I had to start painting to get out. I'm a very logical person, so I had to get out of all that and let go of the words and start just expressing myself through encoded. Well, I never planned to have it encoded, obviously, but it seems like they are.
For sure they are. Right now, while I was watching, like not thoroughly watching, but like just barely focusing my eyes on your art and the painting that you have behind you. I
Mhm.
was seeing like a big tower circling in what could actually be the earth, and then in front of it the moon, that black, that white one.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that pillar looks like a tower, but like a spaceship tower, like a station. So
Interesting.
I was like,
Yeah. I love it when people see stuff that I haven't even towered. That's great. Yeah, love it.
yeah.
That's the fun bit, it's like you're totally detached from any ego, as you say, and you call it the eco, and you just step into that, and that I paint for myself, because I like it. I have lots of them hanging in my own house, and if anyone else loves it, then obviously I'm more than happy to contribute.
Yeah, perhaps you can leave well, give me your information so I can write it in the description in this video.
Cool. Great
So
stuff.
whoever is interested can contact you.
Thank you.
And well, thank you. Thank you. I love you too. Thank you for bringing and sharing your wisdom, knowledge, and that powerful humbleness that I love from you. And yeah, truth. Yeah, I love you.
No.
And yeah, well, I'm Isha, and I will be presenting soon in the Rise of the Guardians conference in March in Sedona for my birthday, which will happen to also be a partial solar eclipse that will be seen in London, in UK.
Ah,
We'll
good.
see. Yeah.
Thinking of
So yeah, and also we can be talking about that in another show, but also the Saturns of the rings of Saturn will disappear on the 23rd
interesting.
from our perspective. So yeah, definitely we'll be sharing more about that because it's very important things will happen anyway. And yeah, also, so get your tickets for the Rise of the Guardian conference. And as you know, Sedona, it's such a powerful place in Earth, a huge vortex. And yeah, come and join us and share with us. We will be having a lot of fun. There will be later workshops after the conference. So definitely time to share we will have. And then on July, full disclosure now conference, I will also be speaking there. So quite excited as well for that. Um, the courses that you know that I'm facilitating online: plasma body activation, luminous DNA activation, and interdimensional travel, source code, and yeah, book coming up in English. And yeah, so you know where you can contact me, and if not, I will write the email in the description as well. I know that the names can get a little bit yeah, they're not common words anyway. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Martina. Thank you, dear. And until next time, thank you everyone for all the comments, like lovely comments that you left, so that you know, even though you can read them later, but everyone like sharing their love and sending love, and very happy about everything that we shared. So
Fabulous. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
thank you everyone. Until next
See you
time.
soon. Bye. Bye bye.
And bye.